record and hand over to you, Claire.
Okay, so thank you, Maddie, for the introduction. So if you don't know me, my name is Claire and I work with SCBO as a Digital Participation Officer. And part of one of the things that I've been working on since I joined in 2018 is how you measure essential digital skills, whether it's in terms of life skills, so using your mobile phone, online banking, whatever the case may be, and also how you measure essential digital skills within the workforce, which is what you've all come to hear me talk about. So if I just share my screen. So essential digital skills in the workforce are based on, so the way I'm going to talk about it is based on the Essential Digital Skills framework, which some of you might have seen before. If you haven't, don't worry about it. It's an easy Google away. Basically, it's split into 5 sections. The bottom one there, being safe, legal and confident online, is embedded across the other 4. So that's at the heart of the Essential Digital Skills framework. So that's just worth bearing in mind when we're thinking about the workforce. And it's split into, as I say, another 4 sections. So I'll just do a very brief overview. It's pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. So communicating, what it sounds like, it's kind of what we're doing now. It's your Zooms, it's Teams, it's all the things that we've all been living on for the past year and a half, pretty much. Transacting is, as mentioned there, things like online banking, so accessing pay slips, maybe doing expenses, that type of thing. Handling information and content is probably something that quite a lot of us have had to get used to in terms of the workplace over the last wee while. So that's like your Office 365, it's knowing how to store stuff in the cloud, how to access files, sharing with colleagues, that type of thing. And problem solving is probably the hardest one to explain, in my opinion, but it's basically just using digital tools and services to solve problems, whether it's literally Googling the answer to something, or using, things like your help tab to solve an issue you're having with some kind of tool that you're using. So it's that kind of thing. So off the back of that, there has been a bit of appetite for a while for people looking to measure the workforce skills of staff within their organisation, whether it's a local authority, a housing association or a charity, or any other kind of voluntary sector organisation you can think of. So as I say, when I started in SCBO in 2018, there was the initial rumblings of this. So I was tasked with coming up with a bit of an online checkup tool. So we initially developed it in consultation via a couple of events. So we held them in Edinburgh, where I think we had over 80 organisations attended, which now seems absolutely wild to have that amount of people in the room, but here we are. And we asked people, what do you need? What would you like from this tool? So we developed something that was quite straightforward. It was basically a bit of a checklist, like a wee online quiz that you could do to look at foundation skills initially, which is being able to turn on and off a device, connect to Wi-Fi, that type of thing, and some life skills, which is split into those same 5 categories that I'm just showing you just now, but in terms of your home personal life, and then another quiz around workforce skills. So we did that. It went well, reasonable success, and then as time went on, we were being asked about it more and more. So for things like organisations that were looking to measure like a big skills gap and various things, and it just felt we initially expected it to be more used for maybe say like charities measuring service user skills, so that kind of life skills, but it turned out workforce skills was very much more in demand. So we took a wee bit of time and thought about refreshing it. Did the same thing again, had a bit of a consultation event, invited a bunch of charities and public and housing sector people along to see what they would like from a new revamped version. I'd like to tell you how that event went, but I decided to shatter my ankle the week before it, so I just had to rely on second-hand information from my lovely colleagues that stepped in and did it in my place. So I'll be honest, that did put the brakes on the new version for a wee while for obvious reasons. And then COVID came along, so even more breaks as we stopped to adjust to this new digital landscape we were living in. Excuse me. But now we have the new version, which has updated content and just looks a whole lot better. So this is what it looks like. Maddie and I will share the links to this and everything after the session. So it lives on the SCVO website, and it's split, as I said. We haven't changed the structure very much because it worked, to be honest. So we've still got your foundation skills, life skills, and work skills. As it says there, it should take about 10 minutes to complete. It's not a long thing. And within the life and the work skills, it's split into those 5 sections that I explained from the framework. So within each section, there are I can statements like so, and you can choose whether or not you can do this, you can partially do it, or you can't do it. If you choose I can partially or I can't do this, a drop down box appears and you can choose whether it's something you would like to learn more about. The reason for this particular scale, because it's been a bit of a bone of contention, I'll tell you the truth, because there was feeling from organisations that it would be better to have maybe a sliding scale. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your skills at this? But to be perfectly honest, when we looked at it, we thought, I don't know, maybe it's a Scottish self-deprecation thing, but you might be, I can log in remotely to my email and other workplaces communication tools. Yes, me personally, I can absolutely do that. Would I mark myself 10 out of 10? Do you know, I probably still wouldn't. There's that slight, I don't know, slight self-deprecation, modesty thing there. So I felt you wouldn't maybe get a clear picture, and it would all be quite nuanced because you're all thinking about, it's subjective. What does I can mean? Like, what does a scale mean to some people? It means different to others. So hence why it is that quite, I can partially. So you work your way through, there's about 4 or 5 statements per section. So as I say, it's not a long thing. You work your way to the end. So you can do the life skills one and then choose to go to workforce skills, or you can do them as standalone. It's entirely up to yourself. And then it brings up your results just in a fairly straightforward bar graph. We used to have an outcomes star, and that was one of the first things we changed because personally, I hate an outcomes star. I find them very difficult to do. I don't really understand them. And we also felt they were slightly not discriminatory, but maybe they weren't the right way to display results, because if you've never seen one before, they can be quite confusing, and we wanted to make it as accessible as possible to as many people, depending on what you were using it for. So this is the way it displays your results. So it'll give you a percentage out of how well, how confident you are at each section. And then what we've done, and this is the bit that is slightly the bane of my existence, but it's very much worth doing, at the back end, we tailor resources so that if, say, you particularly score lower on things like the online data, being safe and confident online, then you will have resources that are more tailored to that section of the checkup. Or if you were confident in communicating, there wouldn't be many resources around communicating. For example, we've got some basic ones that you'll pretty much always be directed towards just because they're great and they kind of cover a bit of everything. And that's what it looks like. So that's, as I say, it's like being in my existence, keeping that all updated in the back of WordPress, but it's 100% worth it. So previously we didn't have that. And then the next bit that I'm going to show you is new as well. So what you can now choose to do that you couldn't choose before was to have your results emailed to you. So you can put your name, your email address in. They will come directly to your email address. So you'll get the results plus all those resources in the email. And it also means as well, if say in 6 months' time, if you wanted to go back and see if you had improved your confidence, then you can literally compare it because you've got that record. There's a wee box down there that says organisation name. And the reason for that is because we've had inquiries around people who wanted to know if they could use SCVO toolkit to measure, sorry, I'm saying you'll hear me say toolkit and checkup, I mean the same thing. We were calling it toolkit and we've kind of moved to calling it a checkup now, just in case you think, what's she talking about? So we had a few organisations approaching us saying, can we use the checkup tool exclusively for our organisation? And quite a few people have asked us this on and off. So previously the answer was no, but I've spent a bit of time where absolute quizzy web developers, and basically what you can do now is kind of is the answer. So we're working on some back end things. So I will show you how we do that just right at the end and explain in a wee bit more detail. But before we do that, I'll show you what you can, I'll take you through a wee bit of what you can actually use it for, just to make it, just to see if it's relevant to yourself. So it can be used to establish a baseline. So if you suspect that maybe your workforce are either brilliant and they don't maybe need it, but you want to prove that they don't need any digital skills support, or if it's the opposite and you think, yeah, there's definitely a gap there and we need to work out where everyone's starting from, you can use it for that. So the establishing baseline and identifying the skills gap kind of go hand in hand. We have previously had a couple of large local authorities use it exactly for that. And what they basically did was they converted the content of the checkup into their own survey. So this is what I'm driving at when I say, could they do it themselves? So they converted it into a survey on their own and sent it out amongst their staff to see what the results would be. And what they did was they went out, they sent it out via email and the intranet, but they also went out with tablets because, well, local authority, the nature of it, not everyone's office based. So it was that, trying to be as inclusive as possible. So they used it then to help shape the digital strategy. So basically to kind of motivate and influence senior management and the board. You know, so basically saying, we've established a baseline, there is a skills gap here, and they used it to write a digital strategy in a couple of cases, basically to strengthen their case for why digital is so important. This was pre-pandemic, so I think nobody's going to say it's not important, it's just maybe not prioritised, maybe in some organisations is maybe the way of putting it. So they then used that to shape how they were going to develop their workforce skills. So both of the local authorities I can think of, and I'm using them as examples because basically because they're quite complex and they've got a lot of different needs, a lot of different departments, people working in different ways, so that they are quite good examples of this. What they did was they used it to establish a digital champion internal network, or to work out which staff members would be keen to volunteer as digital champions. And when I say digital champion, what I mean is someone within the organisation who's willing to take the time to show others how to use specific things. So in one case, what they did was they had, I think it was like a monthly digital champion kind of lunch break session, you know, so staff could drop in and say, I'm really struggling with X on, you know, this thing on Excel, is there someone that could show me? Or they ran it based on specific themes, you know, here's how you access your payslip, here's some e-learning, and they basically kind of developed a bit of a package of support, and that's how they delivered it internally to staff. Or they created wee bits of e-learning or did wee videos. So there's, you know, a mix of things, and there's a few charities that have done very similar. And from, you know, over this kind of thing, so from creating the survey, establishing the baseline, looking at the skills gap, using it to influence senior management, and then to establish the workforce skills development, they could then use all of this to monitor and evaluate the project overall. Because what they then did was, I think about I think it was initially meant to be about 6 months, but to be honest, I think it tipped closer to 9, 12 with everything that's been going on. They went back and did another baseline survey. So basically the exact same survey, sent it out again, all the same way, to see if staff skills had increased, which they had. I'll be honest, I can't remember the exact percentages because they'd split it over various things, and they'd taken the content of the checkup and tailored it specifically to their organisation. So they included the tools and the apps that were specific to that organisation, but there definitely had been an increase. So they were able to evaluate the project and go, great, it worked, which is what we all like to hear. So that's an example of how it can be used. Bit of a whistle stop example, but we're limited for time. So if that's made you kind of think, oh, that's quite interesting, I can see I would maybe like to know more about this or doing that myself. Some things to consider are, why are you doing it? What's your goal? What would you like to find out? So it's not just here's another survey, because I think we can all hand on heart say you get a survey out and you're working, you kind of tend, you maybe go, all right, okay, I'll go back and fill that in. And then in my case, I have the best intentions, but I never ever do. Whereas if it was tied to a specific goal, I think if someone said, could you fill this survey out? So for example, recently in SCV, we did a survey around you are working from home, how you felt about it. And it was to do with shaping our working from home culture going forward, which is obviously quite important at the moment. So it was interesting, and there was I could see how that would benefit me to fill that in. So that's why I filled in. So it's just something to think about if that's what you're doing. What's your goal? What are you hoping to get out of it? And that kind of way, how will you reach people? And I mean that in how will you engage? How will you make it interesting? But also physically, how will you reach people? So for example, like you may be thinking about social care. So you've got office-based staff, but you've also got field-based staff. And a lot of those maybe field-based staff don't have, they maybe use a smartphone, so maybe they don't have access to these types of things the same way sitting on, a laptop or a desktop or whatever, the case may be. So just something to consider as well, and obviously thinking about privacy and GDPR and these types of things. Will it be anonymous? So what I should have included a slide on, but I didn't, but I'll just explain it. We've got, within the checkup that we have, we've got some demographic questions, and it's your basic stuff. Which age category do you fall into? What would you classify as your employment status? Things like that. So what I would say is, in terms of if you were thinking about creating your own survey and making it bespoke to your organisation, think about that anonymity, because do you expect to get an honest answer if people know that their manager's going to see their answers? So particularly if you're so an example actually someone gave was, I am an assistant to a chief exec type person, and she had said, for years I've been doing spreadsheets and I don't have a clue how to do them, and the last thing I need is for him to know how little I know about them. And I think I will hand on heart say I have been in a similar position myself. So something to consider about anonymity and how you go about that. So for example, rather than asking people to submit an email address, as that kind of thing is worth considering, depending on what you're asking people. What you could do is, there could be a box at the bottom, rather than taking email addresses, it could be something around, would you like to be a digital champion? If so, tick this box, and you could put your email address, so you're giving people that kind of option. So just something worth to consider. And then I think, especially over the last wee bit where we've all been forced into working differently, we're talking about workforce skills, but it's probably also worth considering foundation and life skills. Foundation skills are still relevant because there are a lot of people who don't know how to connect to Wi-Fi, who wouldn't know how, to turn the device on and off. They won't know how to do, how to get into apps, how to use passwords, that type of thing. So we don't like to make an assumption, and keeping foundation and life skills in, for me, I think feels more inclusive in some ways as well. You don't, driving straight into workforce, I think sometimes assumes that everyone has a certain level of ability. And that's something that we certainly don't want to do. And life skills, because we've all been working from home, we've all had to change things so dramatically. I personally feel that there's such a big overlap in life and work digital skills now that to split the two of them seems almost pointless. It's worth thinking also about confidence and motivation. So you could include questions around, you could have both. We don't have it on the checkup because, to be honest, it's like collecting qualitative data. It would be just way too hard to analyse. But what you could do is, if you're doing it as an organisation, you could include free text boxes saying, you know, we would like to know, or maybe it would be a separate part of the checkup. So it's, again, just something to think about. So next steps in terms of the checkup, I had said that people were interested in using the checkup for their own organisations. So I've given you a couple of examples there. So part of it is we've listened to what people have said, and I spoke to the guys who do our websites and control the web development and things, because I am a big fan of digital, but not techie. I'm absolutely not techie. So what we were looking at doing was, in terms of the way the back functionality of the checkup works, how could we use it in a better way? So at the moment it's stored, it sits on the website, but the data is fed back into our internal CRM Salesforce system. And basically what I wanted to know was, now that we're able to ask organisations to put their organisation name in, people are able to get their results emailed to them because it was relatively new functionality that we didn't have previously. Are we able to offer a service to people where we say, use our checkup tool and we will take your data, gather it together and give it back to you for you then to analyse, do whatever you like with, because, as I say, a number of people have approached and asked exactly that. And the answer is yes. So what we're doing now, this was in July, you can see from the date there, that's what it looks like basically. So I can choose the checkup type, so whether it's life or work skills. And then the way we were looking at doing it was, you could do it over a start date. So say, for example, as an organisation, you were doing a digital week, you know, focus on digital, and it was the first week in October, for argument's sake. I would put in the start date there, 1st October to the 7th October. I could export the data and filter it by organisation name. And then that, from that data, depending on what we'd agreed, we could then put it into some kind of legible way, or just give you the raw data. We can delete it out after that. We don't hold your data. And you can do with it as you will. So that is one option. The other thing that we've now discovered is possible is we are able to replicate the toolkit onto a hidden page. So it's not public. No one can see it other than whoever has the link. So what we would do is we would provide X organisation with a link to your checkup, and what we're thinking the best way to do it, and this is a wee bit techie stuff that you don't need to do, but what we will do is we would probably give you a code. So say 100, for example, 100 is specific to X organisation, and then it means that we would ask for whoever was completing the checkup to enter that in a field, so that we know, oh, 100 is SCVO, right, fine, we'll export all the 100s, and that's the SCVO data. So there is ways of doing that. And another part of it is, if we keep the structure relatively the same, we can tailor content. So if you wanted to say, you know, I can communicate using insert specific app or communication tool here, you know, we can do that if it was something you wanted to make a bit more specific. So the functionality is now in place. We are at the testing stage. So what I would ask is, if people are looking at this and thinking, oh, that would be quite interesting, I'd like to explore that more. At the moment, what I would ask is if you could get in touch with us directly. What the best way to do this, I find, is to have an individual conversation, so a one-on-one call to explain things, to iron it out, and to see, you know, just have a conversation about what you think you might need, and it's useful for us as well, and then we can work out how we're going to go about it, because it's, as I say, it's new functionality and we are just testing. I'm confident it'll work, because, as I say, not techie, but the guys that did it are, so I think it should all be in place and it should all work as planned. But now that I've said that, I've probably just jinxed myself. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of what it is at the moment. We'll probably be looking to update the content again maybe in the new year, so we might be doing a wee bit of stakeholder engagement in the sense we might send out a wee survey if you've used it before to ask what you think of it. So be looking for a wee bit of feedback just if you have used it. So you might find you get a wee email popping up quite soon. We'd really appreciate getting your honest feedback, because this is the way we've always done this. It's not written by us for us, it's written by us for you. So if you want a say in the content, let us know. And we'll probably also, at some point, as it might be the new year by now, because I cannot believe it's September, we might do another reconsultation event just to say, here's what you've told us, this is what we're looking to do. Does that feel right to you as users of the tool? Okay, so I'm going to say questions, but I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody's faces, because it's just much nicer. Okay, so I can see there's links in the chat. So if you don't mind, I'll go through these first. I think that makes more sense. And then if people want to stick hands up or shout out, that's also doesn't need to be dead formal, as Maddie says. Okay, so Neil, does the tool, I hope I've said that right, does the tool allow for collation of argument? Yes. So what we can do is, that's that hidden link that I described. Now, it would depend if you were looking to split it into departments. What we could maybe do is we could give you a different list of codes. So say it was, 100 was X department, 102, etc. And what we could do is look at it over a specific time period. So yes, there is a way. So that's definitely a one-to-one conversation just to find out exactly what the details are. But yes. Oh, and I've just realised, yeah, I've just answered it after reading. Sorry, no, you've answered this. So I'm as bad as you. Anyone else? Questions? Thoughts?
Gail, I think Gail's got a question. Gail and then Pauline.
Yep. I've got a couple of questions. I think it looks really good, and I think there's different ways I think that Glasgow Life can use it. I'm just wondering, will it be made available in different languages?
That is an excellent question. So it's funny, Gail, I don't know if you know Neil, Glasgow Life Neil.
Neil Patterson?
Yes.
He's my line manager.
Right, okay, so Neil and I had a conversation earlier in the week, and I was talking to him about this. So it's on his radar. I think, to be honest, if it was something that an organisation as big as Glasgow Life, if it was something that you thought you needed, there'd be a conversation, and it's definitely something I would not say no to if it was possible. I think that's a great question.
Okay, and I've got one other question, and again, you may have had a conversation with Neil about it, is will there be an easy read version of it? Because there's a lot of people, certainly within Glasgow City, who might not have the skills to be able to read all of the content that's on the page that we've seen. You brought up the different boxes with the different skills and things like that, and I'm just wondering if there might be an easy read version of it.
There isn't at the moment, but it's something that there could be. This is exactly the type of stuff that when I say we're looking at getting a bit of feedback from people. So if there was an appetite for an easy read, or if it was something, let's be honest, if there was funding or if it was part of a big project and there was a need for it, absolutely, I don't see why not.
So I don't mean to hog, so you can shut me down anytime. I just got a couple of questions. Is there a possibility of, if an individual was to complete that, the survey, whether it's work or whether it's for life, I suppose just now I'm thinking more for life, if people were to be encouraged to fill that out, is there any way at the end of the survey, when the scores come up, you could have a referral tool? If you need help with these schools, contact Glasgow Life at blah, blah, or contact Dundee at blah, blah, blah. Is there any scope for that?
Well, to be honest, what we could do, I don't see this being a problem. We could, if we created a hidden link specifically for Glasgow Life, to add a line of text in at the end of the results saying, please get into it. I don't see that being a problem at all. She says not being a web developer, but because it's text, I don't see that being a problem, no.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that there's people who don't have a lot of foundation skills, little or no foundation skills, then refer them to Learn My Way or different, kind of web apps or online tools maybe isn't the best way when they really would benefit better from kind of face-to-face supported learning. And that's what I'm wondering about that. And Just one other thing, it's more an observation than anything else. Whilst I fully agree with you that getting people to create a survey and getting, heartfelt answers and replies from people and getting, the clear answers from people and honest answers from people. If you're using this tool for workforce development, it couldn't possibly be anonymous, because otherwise you wouldn't know which staff needed that help. So, you know, just from that point of view, it couldn't be anonymous. But I feel happily agree with Joe Public, you want people to be, you know, honest. With staff, I want them to be honest as well. There's a kind of, you know, if you do one, then you're not getting the response. You wouldn't be able to use it for workforce development if you did that.
Yeah, one of the things we did talk about was if it was a big enough organisation, you could put your department in. If it was, you know, so you could say like, you know, facilities are need support and communication or handling, you know. So that's just a thought that we had. But no, I don't disagree with you. I think everything you've said there, Gail's really interesting. I really like the idea about having local referral information. I think that's a great idea.
It's maybe something we can pick up.
Definitely, I think that's what. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Have a chat. That's fine. Pauline, and then I'll come to you, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and this is the first EDS session I've attended, and I think it's got great scope. I'm working with individuals in the community, and so I'm thinking of, you know, trying it with them, but also trying it with people in the charity I'm working for now. How do I do it without scaring them off? Because, you know, I don't want this to be a, you know, you have to be at this level. I want it to be helpful.
I think it depends how you frame the conversation. So I think for me, rather than saying, you know, coming out and saying I'm going to survey your skills, you know, to identify a gap, it's maybe around we recognise everybody had to pivot so quickly last year, and we just want to find out where people's confidence is and where, you know, so it's maybe just slightly softly. It's just maybe how you frame it and that kind of thing around. It's not a test to see where you are. It's we recognise people have had to come very far very quickly. You know, so to be honest, it's one of the few things that COVID has given us a good, you know, a bit of a good excuse to, you know, why you would look at this stuff. So you can maybe blame that. But yeah. I absolutely see your point. But yeah, I think it's how you frame it.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, I asked about whether support can be, you know, it's for organisations outside Scotland, and you know, you've said that SCVO can't follow up, but can I get the info? Can I follow up? How far can I go with it? You know, outside of SCVO's purview.
To be honest, Pauline, it's one of these things that it's a public tool and we're not precious about it. So maybe if it was through, you know, England and Wales, it's one of these things that maybe as long as we were given the, you know, like a logo or accreditation,
absolutely, yeah,
welcome to take it and use it in whatever way, but we wouldn't do the storing of the data because it's out with Scotland.
Yeah, okay, great,
so
thank you.
Any GDPR problems? Cool. Dave.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. It was just really picking up on Gail's points, but more thinking for small organisations. My history, I've worked for a couple of the TSIs in Scotland, and I volunteer with a small organisation as well, which this tool would be really useful for. I was just wondering on the actual referring people who need support for small organisations, it might be worthwhile kind of directing them to local colleges and also kind of the SDS individual learning accounts, because obviously depending on your income through them, you can get up to £200 worth of training, which they could then use for kind of upskilling themselves, because obviously small organisations like the one I volunteer with couldn't afford to do training themselves. I mean, I'm kind of trying to train one of the two staff on how to use social media better. It's not my specialist area, but it's something that I've done with other organisations and done some training. So but I just think if you could direct them to kind of like, so I'm in Dundee, so Dundee and Angus College, or obviously Glasgow colleges, etc., that might be a way of helping smaller people working with or even volunteering for smaller organisations.
Yep, it's a really good point. I'm kind of in my head, I'm now wondering if what we do is it's almost like a directory. I'm trying to work out the kind of back end, how the functionality of it would work. So it's maybe like a directory that you can click a link on and you choose your local authority areas. Yes, it's such a good point. Very much take what you're saying on board. Gail, have you still got your hand up from last time, or is this a new hand?
No, it's a new hand, sorry. Just to pick up what Dave said there, we use and utilise ITAs from SCS, all the time. I've done it for a lot of years. The only thing I would say, the kind of caveat to what Dave is saying, is that ITA funding can only be used for a certain level of digital qualification, and it tends to be qualifications. It's a level 5, I think it's got to be. So that wouldn't really be any use for people who need basic or foundation skills. But I still think it's useful for people to know that the ITA funding's available.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
I'm just aware of the time, we're at 10:43. There's been, Maria, you asked a question, which actually some of you have asked me questions that Claire can answer afterwards. So I'll put Claire's, I think I had already, let me put in Claire's email.
What I will say, Marie, Karen, I know Karen from previous days of the digital office, and Karen has done this very well. So Karen might be your woman to explain on the ground. If not to put you in the spot, Karen, but as the work that the council did was really good.
Yeah. So I work for West Lothian Council, and we did our first Essential Digital Skills Survey back in 2018. We took the question set and created our own survey. We then replicated that in 2020, just to kind of measure how far we'd come or not, as the case may be. Although mostly across the piece, we had made some strides, but we've also used it at a very service specific level. So we've had situations where some of our services have been bringing in new technology or new systems, and we needed to check out whether staff had the skills to use these new, particularly digital systems. So we've done a very focused piece of work, but again, using the same question set, and got staff to complete it. So then we could identify where the gaps were and do tailored training. But Claire, I'm really interested in the whole bit about, based on an individual's results, we can then tailor that thing. So I might have a separate conversation with you about how that may work. We're about to do a service specific thing with our care at home workers, because we've identified that there's some issues. We're wanting them to do more digital things, and we think they've got some gaps. But the part that Marie was asking about in terms of how do we get to operational staff, we literally went and stood in front of them in the days when you could do that thing with tablets and said, can you help us? We're wanting to see what people's digital skills look like. Here's the survey. Or if they didn't want to do that, we gave them the old-fashioned paper survey, and then we input the details. So we did manage to capture a good range of responses that way.
Thank you. Karen's just summed up everything I wanted to say.
I'm gonna bring us to a close there because we're at 10:46. Thank you all so much for coming along this morning. Hopefully you found that interesting. Thank you, Claire. That was hopefully very informative. I'm going to stop recording. And as I said,